Excellent. Thank you to everyone for attending the virtual meeting for the Licensing and Public Safety Committee on Wednesday the 10th February 2021. For those of you who don't know, my name is Councillor Matthew Lynch and I am Chair of this committee. Councillor Margaret Francis, Vice Chair. Please note this is a Teams meeting, it is being recorded and the video stream will also be uploaded to YouTube after the meeting. For each item, I will invite members to use the raise hand function on your iPad to make any comments to ensure each member...
I turned it on before I went red.
What did you say?
Aaron, can you turn your microphone off, please? I can hear you putting your kettle on. For each item, I will invite members to use the raise hand function on your iPad to make any comments to ensure each member has the opportunity to speak and they are not speaking over each other. When speaking, please reference the paragraph number to enable everyone to follow you. Please mute your microphone, especially if you're making a brew, and video feed when you are not speaking. If the technology fails, then I will adjourn the meeting for a few minutes to try and resolve the issue, or if this is not possible, a new date and time will be organised. Please can I ask all members to confirm they can hear and speak before the meeting begins, and I will call out each member's name. Margaret France.
Here, Chair.
Terry Brown.
Present, Chair.
Val Corns.
Present, Chair.
Mark Clifford.
Present, Chair.
Jean Cronshaw.
Present, Chair, but I've no iPad.
Duly
Just on the
noted. Jean, as you can't raise your hand, if you do want to say anything, just say Jean.
Yeah. Okay.
Gordon France.
Here, Chair.
Anthony G. Tony.
You're muted. You're muted.
Are you saying Danny or Tony? You keep on saying Tony.
Tony. Says Tony G on my list. Danny G.
I don't think you... Yes, that's better. Good afternoon, Chair.
Good afternoon. Tom Gray.
Present, Chair.
Hasina Khan.
Present, Chair.
Roy Lees.
Present, Chair.
Laura Lennox.
Good afternoon, Chair.
Good afternoon. And Sheila Long.
Present, Chair.
Excellent. Have we got any apologies?
Apologies from Councillor Joyce Snape.
I've got Councillor Sharp written under here.
Sorry, my mistake. Must have misspelled.
Right. I'm going to say, because unless somebody's been recently elected, I've no idea who that is. Right. Excellent. Moving on to the agenda. Just before we start, obviously, the last 12 months have been a very difficult time. The Licensing and Public Safety Committee hasn't met in almost a year. Obviously, this has given stern challenges for the licensing department. So what I'm going to do before we go into the meeting is just hand over to Nathan, who's going to give us an update on what has happened over the previous 12 months and going forward, how we are going to manage moving back to a more normal level of service. Nathan.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. I'm sure all members are aware there's been pretty much unprecedented challenges facing the licensed trade over the past 12 months. The licensing team as a whole has responded to countless requests for information, different service requests. There's been new legislation published almost weekly, which has obviously had a significant impact upon the licensed trade. Directly within the licensing team, members will be aware that the authority is currently in the process of sharing services, and as part of that, a number of new shared directors have been appointed. Now, that means for the purposes of licensing, the team has been moved out of the previous customer and digital directorate, and we have a new director, Jonathan Node, in a new directorate. Now that's only taken effect relatively recently within the last, or I suppose last month, has taken shape. In terms of issues which have directly impacted on the trade, right at the beginning of the pandemic, we realised that the trade were really struggling. The taxi trade, were really struggling, being able to submit themselves for Group 2 compliant medicals, simply because GPs weren't offering them. They were offering the services, in other places where it was considered to be more necessary. As a result, we proposed a temporary change to our licensing policy, and I thought it would be useful just to update you on that. Basically, what we have proposed is that for anybody who's currently licensed, we will accept almost a self-declaration that there's been no change in that person's medical standard or medical health. They haven't been diagnosed with any other conditions, and as a result of that declaration, we will grant them a license for a period of 12 months. What that allows is hopefully the pressures on the NHS and for doctors to be able to carry out those medicals, and then at the stage they're able to, the driver will submit themselves for a medical, provide it to us, and then have their license extended for the usual period. Now, we did have a bit of a backlog of driver applications outstanding, but as a result of this process, we're pretty much on top of that backlog now. So we're processing through those applications as normal now.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Nathan. Right, I'm moving back on to today's agenda. Item 1, minutes of the meeting Wednesday 19th of February 2020. Obviously, members will have to cast their minds back. Is there any comments on those minutes, or do I have a proposer?
I'll propose them, Chair.
I'll propose them, Chair. Gordon.
Jean
Right, I've got two
seconding that.
proposed, and right, they're seconded. Excellent. Item 2, declarations of any interest. Just let me switch back to my papers. Members are reminded of their responsibility to declare any pecuniary interest in respect of matters contained in this agenda. If you have a pecuniary interest, you must withdraw from the meeting. Normally should leave the room before the business starts to be discussed. You do, however, have the same right to speak as a member of the public and may remain in the room to enable you to exercise that right, and then leave immediately. In either case, you must not seek to improperly influence a decision on the matter. Does anybody have any declarations of interest? I'll take the silence as no. If you do find you do have declaration of interest, please do make sure you make us aware at any time. Item 3, public questions. Nathan? No public questions?
No, I don't believe any have been received, Chair.
And we go on to item 4, minutes of the general licensing subcommittee. There have been no meetings, therefore we'll move swiftly on to item 5, minutes of the Licensing Act 2003 subcommittees. We'll have a proposer and seconder for those minutes. We'll do for both.
Move them, Chair. Councillor Clifford.
Thank you, Mark. And a seconder.
Jean, a second.
Were you in attendance of those, Jean?
I'm not certain. I've to some I think, but not to all.
Right. Can we have somebody who's in attendance of them to second? I'll second them. I was there.
You were all right.
Right. Moving on. sorry, there was 3 minutes of the meetings. I do apologise. Yeah, go on, Nathan, please. A, B and C.
So the members who were at the item A was Councillor Matthew Lynch in the chair. The vice chair was Councillor Mark Clifford and Councillor John Walker. There were members present at that meeting. It was an application to vary a premises licence for the Little Inn on the Park.
Right, so just to clarify, Mark, are you proposing those minutes?
Yes, Chair, for 5A
Right,
and
well,
5B.
I will second 5A. B,
5B, councillors Matthew Lynch, councillors Gordon France and councillors Margaret France. It was a summary.
So I was just going to say I can propose those, Chair.
And I'll second them, Chair. Gordon.
excellent, thank you. And C?
Same again, Chair.
Same again. So, same again, Margaret and Gordon?
I'll propose them this time, Chair.
Oh, see,
Gordon.
swift.
And I can
Swift and
second them,
sneaky.
yeah.
Thank you. Right. I will then move on to item 6, consideration of the statutory taxi and private hire vehicle standards issued by the Department for Transport. Over to Nathan.
Thank you, Chair. Members, I won't read through all sections of the report. I'll try and pick through the relevant sections. So the purpose of this report is to inform members of the published statutory and private hire vehicle standards, which has been issued by the Department for Transport. The recommendations are that members note the content of the statutory standards and that members note that officers shall now begin a review of the Council's hackney carriage and private hire licensing policies in light of this document. I'll move straight to paragraph 7, the background of the report, which states that section 177 of the Police and Crime Act 2017 enables the Secretary of State to issue statutory guidance to taxi and private hire licensing authorities as to how those functions may be exercised so as to protect children and vulnerable individuals who are 18 years and over from harm. The legislation was, to a large extent, really promoted by the J and Casey reports on child sexual exploitation and abuse, which was seen in Rotherham, and both those reports highlighted examples of how the taxi and private hire vehicle drivers were directly linked to children that were abused, including in some instances how children were picked up from schools, children's homes, families' homes, and abused or sexually exploited. There was a public consultation on the draft statutory guidance that ran between the 12th of February 2019 and the 22nd of April 2019. There was a lengthy consideration of the consultation responses, and the DFT published this guidance which is being considered, entitled the Statutory Taxi and Private Hire Standards, which I'll refer to as the standards from now on the 21st of July 2020. There's a copy of those standards appended to this report at Appendix 1. The standards themselves, they contain a number of different recommendations, all connected to those taxi and private hire licensing functions. This includes things such as criminality checks for licence holders, working with the police, sharing information with other licensing authorities, dealing with complaints and drivers, about drivers and operators, training for members, criminal convictions and rehabilitation of offenders, safeguarding awareness, advice, guidance and training for drivers, language proficiency, CCTV in licensed vehicles, regulation of booking and dispatch staff, and record keeping. The standards go a long way to stating what the Secretary of State requires of licensing authorities, and he goes on. The guidance goes on that they expect that these recommendations will be implemented unless there's a compelling local reason not to. It's clear that the desire of government is to see consistent standards applied to taxi and private hire licensing authorities across the country. Officers believe that the Council's current hackney carriage and private hire licensing policy will need to be reviewed carefully with a view to implementing any changes required in light of the recommendations set out in the standards. Members are asked to note the content of this report, give consideration to the standards at Appendix 1, and note that officers will begin a review of the Council's hackney carriage and private hire licensing policy in light of these standards. Chair, that's the report. Unless there's any questions, that's everything from me.
Thank you, Nathan. The report recommends for noting. Is there any questions from members first? Councillor Lennox.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to know, I actually have read the whole thing. I can't see anything that we cannot accept. Are there any issues that we need to be aware of at all that relate to Chorley? And are there any issues in relation to the current situation that might present a problem for us? Thank you.
There are a number of different items which are proposed by the guidance. There are some occasions or some instances where our policy matches what the guidance currently shows, or actually where our policy goes further than what's required. However, there are a number of instances where, in order to comply with the guidance, we'll have to change our policy. So it will be through or will require a process of amending that policy, consulting with the trade, and then presenting those proposals to the to members for a decision. On the face of it, there are some contentious questions around CCTV. The guidance doesn't specifically mandate councils require CCTV to be implemented, but it recommends that. Now, there are some questions regarding the legality of making a mandatory requirement for CCTV in licensed vehicles, and that's around who the data controller is, and also around the constant audio recording. There's been a number of cases which have found themselves before the ICO, Information Commissioner's Office, surrounding that. So there are some questions around that.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just? I was aware of the CCTV issues and the oral recording as well, because London Transport have consulted me today because I have an Oyster card, and I just wondered whether we would have to do something like that, or whether that would be done through Lancashire County Council, or quite how it would do.
The crux of the CCTV issue is that if in the event that Chorley was considering imposing CCTV, the council would have to demonstrate that there was that it was a proportionate response to a local issue, and it would be a case of the council being able to demonstrate that once or when and if the council was able to demonstrate that, then it would be a case of developing a policy which proportionately addressed that local need or that local issue. There wouldn't necessarily be a requirement to inform individual licensed users, or from my understanding as it stands, there wouldn't. However, there would probably be consideration around how we or what we mandated in order to make sure that people who were using licensed vehicles that did have mandatory CCTV were informed that was happening, i.e. signage and that sort of thing.
Thank you.
Councillor Gordon-France.
Thank you, Chair. You've answered some of my questions, to be honest, Nathan. I was just wondering, I mean, obviously from my point of view, I see the dash cam or the CTV as good for the driver as well as the passenger. The question I was sort of saying, would the driver have to inform the passenger that in fact they were being recorded as they got into the vehicle? You think signage would be enough, do you?
There are a number of local authorities who have introduced mandatory CCTV policies. Obviously, Rotherham is one. I know Rossendale is another. There are others across the authority. They're not in the majority by a long way, but there are a couple of ones that have made the case. From what I understand, there's no requirement on the driver to, in their policies, to let a passenger know. They've gone around the signage route. That's the way that they've made sure that everybody's aware that they're being recorded.
Right. That's fair. I mean, I see advantages for drivers as well as passengers, to be honest. Thank you.
Councillor Margaret France.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to say I'd welcome this statement that council should be working together and sharing information, because I think that's really important with licensing. I think we've had one or two instances where people have come before us and there's been some evidence from outside the area of events that have happened in the past, and I think that is really, really important, so I welcome that. And just to wonder, Nathan, how much of this work now that we're under shared services is going to be done jointly between the two boroughs, or is the in essence it's going to be two separate units working independently? There must be a sort of common ground here, I would have thought. Thanks.
Yes, so Chorley is currently in the, or Chorley and Satterable, the licensing team is in the unique position of having a shared director, but the services themselves aren't currently shared. So there haven't been any decisions as to how that licensing function will be shared. Obviously there will be crossover because the two councils are considering the same standards. However, there hasn't been direct discussion as to how to sync up those policies or anything like that.
Right, thank you.
Any other questions? So that report is for noting. And on that, we have one final item, which is any other business. No other business has been agreed with the chair. However, we've just held a meeting with the trade as part of the licensing liaison. And there's a couple of points that have come out of that meeting, which members obviously would be, I'm sure, would be eager to hear. Obviously, that due to the impact, Nathan's touched on this, there has been some impact on services, and I think the trade was concerned regarding that. Assurance have been offered and welcomed, so hopefully that will get back to some normality soon. The other two issues, I was keen to hear from the trade how they are handling the massive impact that COVID has put upon them. And obviously, you know, one trader has said that the private hire trade has all but disappeared, other than school runs when open and hospital runs. So obviously there's been a massive impact on the trade in Chorley, and I think we should be conscious of that when making decisions going forward, certainly for the short term. The other issue, Councillor Steve Holgate, who's sent his apologies for today's meeting, gave a brief outline of his desire to incorporate Chorley Council's climate change policy into the licensing trade by urging, incentivising the trade to go to cleaner, greener vehicles, and obviously that there's a commitment there that we will look at how best to hit the target of 2030, which the government has issued. So it's just a few points. It was very welcome to speak to the trade again after a year off. I'm sure members are delighted to be back. I know I am. I assume that the next 6 months will have its own challenges for this committee, and members may have individual circumstance which gives them challenges over the next 6 to 12 months. So if anybody does have an issue, please contact me or contact the licensing offices or democratic services, and we can see what support can be given to ensure that we can get back to business as usual. On that basis, has anybody any questions? As it's been so long since we've met, is there any questions that anybody would like to ask?
Jean.
I'll go to Councillor Danny G first. Or is it, sorry, Councillor Gordon France.
Hi, Chair. I'm just assuming that the taxis got the business support scheme from the council that other licensing trades like pubs and clubs and things got, that they did get some support. And whilst I'm very, very strongly in favour of green policies with all vehicles, probably now is not the right time to approach the taxi trade after they've had quite a big hit with the COVID. It's just my thoughts, that's all.
Thank you, Councillor France. Councillor Cronshaw.
Thank you. I've been asked about one thing, and that's as we're now teaming up both sets of taxis, are we, as the pickup area changed for, say, the South Ribble coming into Clayton? Because before they could not pick up on the streets, but can they now?
No, I think, shared working is about us employing officers which cover both authorities. It's not about taxis.
It's not going to make any difference.
Boundaries under the same licensing authority, which can't, as my understanding is, you can't actually have a joint licensing authority anywhere. So, as it was pointed out. As it was pointed out in the licensing liaison meeting, while our jobs as members are safe, Nathan's isn't, which I think Nathan thought was highly amusing at the time. But yes, I think I'll let Nathan explain properly what shared services will mean to the licensing authority.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much as the trades, as Councillor Lynch suggests, whether or not the licensing team goes through the process of sharing services shouldn't make a direct difference to where individually licensed vehicles or drivers are able to sort of ply their trade. The fact remains is wherever it is that you intend to operate, you require a license, or for example, private hire requires a license, driver license, vehicle license, operator license from whichever district. So all three licenses need to be issued from the same district. The shared services won't change that. Does that answer your question?
That does, yes. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
I can answer other people's questions now.
Councillor Roy Lees, and then Laura's put her hand down. So Councillor Roy Lees. Are you on mute, Roy?
Looks like it's frozen, Chair.
This picture's frozen, Chair.
Matt, I'm going to have to go now. I think I'll give my apologies for having to go at 1:30 to the hospital.
All right.
Okay, thank you. Cheers, thank you.
Right, turn your video feed off and see if it'll come through as just with audio. Oh, he's gone. Right, he's back. Are you there, Roy? He lives in Coppell. It's
steady on, Chair. Steady on.
I'm sure his rural broadband is an issue nationwide, not just in Chorley. There you go, diplomatic answer. Roy, can you hear us? No. Roy, you're on mute.
Sorry.
No. Matthew, is there any way to get Roy via telephone or? Roy, can you type your message? I'll go to Carl and see if I can. So what
Hello,
his
Chair.
issues out.
Hello, Chair. Hello, councillors. Look, first of all, I sympathise with Councillor Royleys because I live in Coppell, semi-rural parish also, and it's a nightmare. And secondly, Chair, I'd like it that there's talk of poor Nathan having to bite some bullet in changes ahead. I'd like to volunteer before Nathan to take that bullet, sir. I'm just saying.
Carl, all I can say is you should have seen Nathan's face. It was it should be put up in a corridor somewhere. Right, Roy. Is it a point that you're desperate to make? On that basis, right, I think what we'll do, if you raise the ring me up or ring the officers up and we'll deal with it. I don't know what's going on with your connection at the moment. But yeah, anyway, on that note, can I thank everybody for their attendance? Can I wish you a healthy and safe next few months, and hopefully at the next meeting we'll be in a different place. Thank you very much for your attendance today, and goodbye.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Bye.
Thank you.